Hello and welcome to Double C Sports. I am so thrilled today because this is the realization of a lifelong dream of mine, and that's to have my own sports show. So you are witnessing the realization of a dream, and I don't know how often you get that opportunity, but you've got it today. So I want to introduce our cast for the day, and then we'll get into some sports topics directly for you. I want to first introduce Mr. Keith Tribble, and I'm going to let him talk about himself and share a little bit about where he's been, what he's doing, and his unique perspective on college sports, which is what our main topic is for today. So go ahead, Keith.
Good morning, Carmen. It's a pleasure to be here to launch off your sports show, and I know we'll have a good time for this hour. But I've been involved with sports for a number of years. Played football at the University of Florida, Go Gators, and had an opportunity to work as an assistant athletic director, and worked at University of Nevada, Las Vegas as an assistant athletic director. Was an athletic director at University of Central Florida. I was a bowl director at two or three bowls: Las Vegas Bowl, the CarQuest Bowl back in the day, and the famed Orange Bowl. So I've been involved in sports most of my career, if not all of my career. Right, I have my own consulting firm which deals with event management and consulting with athletic departments, and I also work as the CEO of a foundation, hospital foundation here in Miami. So I do a lot of things, but sports is my passion.
That's great. I can't resist the temptation to share one of my favorite Keith Tribble moments, and I was an intern at the Orange Bowl committee when you were there, and it was getting to be closer to bowl time, and it's starting to get kind of hectic and crazy, and it's just one of those moments where it's very intense, and I don't remember what we were having a meeting about, but we were trying to get unstuck with a bit of a problem. And it was funny, it was just one of those moments because you came in the room and you listened for a few minutes, and then you just kind of quieted everyone and said, guys, there's still going to be a bowl game on January the 5th or the 3rd, whatever day it was. So, and that's all you really had to say, and then walked out and left.
Hey, that's what it is. I mean, hey, still going to have a game. Just everybody calm down. We'll get through this and we'll make it happen.
Exactly, and that was such a cool moment for me because it was just your presence there that just calmed everybody and refocused us past where we were stuck to get into what we needed to do. So that was just brilliant. That's my favorite Keith Tribble moment out of all of the many. But Dr. Mincy White was not able to join us today, so we did meet, and I have a little video for her that I wanted to share. And we're going to be cutting her in and out a little bit, and we'll also be introducing our Google Plus Fem Fan of the Week here in just a second. So we got a few videos, and we'll be getting into some topics.
I am a PhD in sport administration as well as math.
Okay. There we go. I hear we're having just a little bit of audio difficulty. Keith, you said you couldn't hear that at all?
No.
Okie dokie. Let's figure out why. Because the Hangout toolbox here, my friend, muted her. Don't know why it did that. I didn't ask you to mute her. That's interesting. Google technology. What are you going to do? All right. Well, I'll tell you what. We're going to... All right. We're just going to eject that out of the room for now, and we'll bring it back in a little bit and try it again. But let's get started with talking about some of our topics for today. One of the things that we wanted to discuss, and particularly why I wanted to bring you on, as you've kind of moved through the different aspects of college sports, having been an athlete, having been, in athletic departments as, in different roles as an administrator, and even on the bowl side, we've seen this latest movement to have college athletics take the form of a union. And Dr. White has some opinions on it, and if we can bring this video up and cooperate it, then we'll hear that. But I wanted to get your take on it. What has led to this change? Is this a good change? What is your opinion on this whole movement of the unionization of college athletics?
Well, I mean, it's a very complicated issue. I mean, you have opinions on both sides, and I'm sure both sides believe strongly in those opinions. But being a former athlete and, as you said, and also being an administrator, I understand the plight. I think you asked what started it. I think you have to go back to the days where student athletes, most student athletes, I know football players in particular, received laundry money, $15 a month, over and above their scholarship. Somewhere, I would say, in the 80s or 90s, that was eliminated. And I think what's happened is everything has escalated in terms of coaches' salaries, facilities, you name it, on the athletic side. But the athlete himself has not received anything more than that actual scholarship. So I think it was just something that was brewing, and someone decided, well, we need to, take our own rights back. We need to form a union. I don't particularly agree with a unionization, but I do agree with the direction that the NCAA and the institutions are going now, where they are really putting the student athlete first, whatever benefits that may be, to enhance their experience. So I think it's a good thing in terms of enhancing the athlete's experience, but I'm not in favor of unionization.
Okay, that's not going to work. No worries. All right, so you said that you're not a big fan of the unionization, but you would like to see perhaps some protections and some more equitable sharing of revenues. Is that kind of what your thinking is?
Well, I like the fact that they're now addressing allowing additional dollars beyond the scholarship. Actual cost of attendance is what it's really called. I think that's a good thing, because right now institutions are doing that for other students who have scholarships. They actually get the actual cost of attendance, whatever that may be. Athletics has not done that, and I think that's something they should do. I agree that an athlete, you cannot deprive an athlete of his or her likeness. It belongs to them. It's a right that they have. Now, how you monetize that, I think that if we can send a man to the moon, we can figure out how to monetize that in an appropriate manner that keeps amateurism intact. So I think any way we can give health benefits, extended health benefits to student athletes, give them opportunity to graduate beyond their years of eligibility, and whenever they need to, whatever, how long it takes, because To play college sports at any level, in any sport, is a real sacrifice, and I think that those student athletes need to have that opportunity to finish their education, to be protected from major injuries, and also to receive some sort of benefits if they have enhanced the university, as most of them do.
That's a good point. You know, one of the things that I know Dr. White and I were discussing the other day is the idea that, you know, being a college athlete, particularly at the Division I level, really requires certain sacrifices of the athlete. You know, there are obviously some time constraints, but student athletes until recently couldn't work. It was that was the rule, that you could not have another side job. So whatever your scholarship was, and in most cases it covered the cost of, it wasn't your living expenses. You know, it was how much was your tuition to go to school, and you got books, and you know, you probably got room and board, and that was about it. Granted, it's been more than a few years since I was an athlete at a university, but you know, how has, you know, we've lightened up on that rule. So what about the argument that student athletes now have a choice? They can decide if they want to go get a job. So why should we have to pay them? I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Well, even if you have the opportunity to do it, you know, it's the saying that it's okay to do it. When are you going to find the time to do it? You know, you're studying, you're trying to maintain and keep in shape. It's going to be tough. And so even though you have, you know, the authority and you may be okay to do it, you know, student athletes cannot find the time to do it in their schedule. So, you know, it's almost like, yeah, we can do it, but yet when are we going to do it? When can we do it? You know, we practice 3 or 4 hours a day. We have the study hall. We go to class. The difference is that normal students who aren't athletes, those 2 or 3, 4 hours that they have a day, they're not practicing. They can work, but that student athlete has to be able to practice and do these things.
Right. And one point that I often make when I sit, and I have a lot of friends who are not athletes, and we talk about the fact that student athletes, their talent is owned by the university and their conference and the NCAA, to the extent that, you know, if I were a great computer science major and I developed some awesome computer program and I code it and do all this stuff, I could sell it, I could go where I wanted with it, show up with my program on different talk shows, do all kinds of fun stuff with it. And make as much money as I wanted to, and then still come back and have my scholarship and still, you know, be a part of the university. Athletics is different, though. And as an athlete, no matter how talented you are, your talent stays with the university, and you can't do that. You can't, you know, you don't see Jameis Winston, for example, having, you know, a football camp through the summer where he's teaching kids how to throw a perfect spiral or something like that. And so my thought, you know, and that's another reason why I think, you know, compensating athletes, because for that period of time, your talent is owned by the university.
Well, yeah, I agree with that, and I think on that has been, especially today. I mean, the problem is that you have rules and sort of policies that you're doing in 2014 that's been on the books for decades, and times have changed. And I don't think whether it's the NCAA or the institutions or whoever's in charge has really looked at how we can apply what we need to do today to compensate or to be in step with what's expected. I agree with you. If you have someone like you know, any student athlete who has any kind of ability, as long as they don't represent the university in whatever they're doing, it should be okay. I mean, if you have a talent that you are a good sprinter and you want to coach people to be sprinters, you should be allowed to do that. So I think there needs to be some way that we look at how we're going to do business today to treat those student athletes as if they were, you know, regular students or people who have those abilities, like you said, the great engineer, the great story writer who wants to write books and sells their books as they're in college. So I hope that's the direction that the NCAA and those institutions are going, because I think in the end everyone will win.
That's a good point, and I hope so too. How did we get to this point? I sometimes feel, and I worked for a brief period of time in compliance at Kansas State, that it's kind of one of those, the NCAA rule book is actually very, very thick. It's about the size of most telephone books, and so it seems to me that there would be something seedy or unwholesome or whatever that was done, and then we'd make a rule about it, and the rule would almost be more severe than the violation or whatever. And so we ended up with this rule book and this stack of rules based on circumstances that may have happened in the past. That's my viewpoint. How did we end up at this point where we have so many rules and regulations regarding this particular area of athletics?
Well, I mean, that's a hard question to answer. The only thing I can say is based on my experience and being involved on it as a director of athletics and also as an administrator throughout the years, is that you see a culmination of a lot of different rules on top of rules, and whether it's to have a level playing field, which is very impossible. You will never have a level playing field in college athletics. It just won't happen. There's a difference between Kansas State, Iowa State, Florida State, Harvard. I mean, there's just a difference. So you can't regulate and say, okay, we're all going to be on the same page throughout everything. Now, there are certain things that you can regulate. The number of scholarships, that are a little, you can finitely say, yes, that's, but in terms of some of the things that's in the rule book, I think you're right. We began to pile on, began to try to put a level playing field. Someone thought someone would get an advantage. We put a rule in there, and then we find out that it's unenforceable. The old bagel rule. I think you've been in the area where you can have a bagel, it's okay, but if you put cream cheese or something on it, it's not okay. But it's the same bagel. So I just think that there was, was there thought in it? Sure, there was some thought in it. But I think really in practical application, I think that's where I would suggest that the NCAA and institutions go to practical application as it relates to what's happening today.
Yeah, I often used to say that if we really wanted a level playing field, everybody would play naked with no shoes on.
That's okay. that'll be. You might sell a lot of tickets.
Isn't that what the lingerie football? Never mind.
Okay.
That's another topic for another.
That's another topic.
But that's a bit of an extreme statement. But the point, and I agree with you that when you have differences in alumni bases, which is what is a large source of revenue for athletic departments, then you're gonna have differences or inequalities, let's put it that way, between different universities and what they can do for athletics and the types of coaches they can get and all of that kind of stuff. So I agree with you, there's no practical, realistic way to make that playing field level all the way across the board. And I think sometimes that's why we marvel at some of the Kansas State and some even was it Boise State and Hawaii for a while, which comparatively are smaller universities, have smaller pools of athletic funding and all of that, but still accomplish runs at national titles and all of that. So there is something kind of, not miraculous is the wrong word, but admirable perhaps.
Well, I think when you have universities and presidents and athletic directors that are at the institutions, if they live within their means, live with who they are happy with who they are, what they represent, then I think the model works. But what happens is when you have someone who has a $40 million athletic budget and they're trying to compete with Texas at $150 million.
Yeah.
That's just like, you've got someone who lives in a $30,000 house and someone lives in $1 million house. It's going to be different. and you're going to, when you try to bring people to both of those houses, they're going to have a different opinion of you. So I just think that to try to level the playing field with rules is always the wrong way to do anything. You just need to find common ground which you can agree on in terms of the, I call the keeping the integrity of the game or the sport and the integrity of amateurism to a level that is consistent. The rest of it you shouldn't try to regulate.
Well, what about the idea, you know, we've seen a lot of shaking up of the conferences. You know, the Big 12, you know, which that was where I was, has dropped down to, I believe they have 10 teams now.
Right.
You know, and you know, everybody seems to be shifting around. The SEC picked up some teams and all of that. And someone gave the opinion that eventually what's going to happen, and it may not happen right away, but probably within our lifetime, you'll see it whittle down to basically 4 conferences. You'll have one on, you know, the East Coast. You'll have one kind of, you know, in the Midwest, and you'll have, you know, it'll just break up the country into 4 major conferences. You know, do you think that that's where we're headed with this, or some kind of a conference realignment that more accurately reflects, you know, what you're talking about?
Well, you know, I think there are a lot of people who subscribe to that. In fact, some 15, 20 years ago, a good friend of mine who was a former athletic director at a major institution, we were talking, and he said one day he believed that there will be 4 major conferences with about 15 to 16 teams in it that that will make up the highest level of college athletics. And we're not far from that. I mean, we've got, you know, the Power 5 conferences. I think they have, 68 members or 66 members that represent those Power 5, and then you have the Group of 5. So I think within the next 10 years, there'll be some more shuffling. It's going to happen. It's bound to happen. The money is too great. And it may come to the 4 major conferences with maybe, you know, 20 teams in it or something. I don't know what the number will be, but and they have to be like institutions, meaning they can provide adequately for the student athletes. They provide the necessary financial backing. They're in good, strong shape university-wise, academic-wise. And, you know, at the end of the day, that's what you have to have. And so to answer your question, I think it may happen. I think there are a lot of people who really believe it will happen.
That'll be really interesting to see. And I don't know if I would say I'd be sad to see that, because you know, having been an athlete in the Big 12, I love the Big 12, with the exception of a few of the teams in that conference.
Like Kansas, right? In your case.
Yeah. They're on. Yeah. I've got a T-shirt or something that says my favorite team is Kansas State and whoever KU plays.
Okay.
So, you know, we have our rivals just like everybody else. But, you know, what the Big 12 was and what it meant and just my experience there was something that I really enjoyed. So to see it disappear, you know, and I understanding K-State and kind of the size of our university and the size of our alumni, I don't know how well they would fare in a conference in a structure like that. You know what I mean? You've got your huge Division I's with very, very large budgets, Florida, Texas, you know, those types of schools. And then you have, you know, kind of the bigger but not huge Division I's, which I think you're talking about, like the Kansas, the Colorados, you know, Missouri, those types of schools. And I just wonder if they will get lost in the shuffle in a situation like that.
I don't think so. I think you do have some, you know, you could go through each one of those Power 5 conferences and probably pick out 3 or 4 or 5 teams that probably will struggle if they were not in that major conference. And conversely, you could take some that are in the Group of 5 and say if they were in that Power 5, they would do well. Now, here's a good example. For many years, as you know, Louisville was in Conference USA, and they were in the Big East. Mm-hmm. And now the Big East is the American Conference. They were considered one of those that, they have a $70 million budget, which is comparable to some of the Power Five. Well, now they're a Power Five school. So there may be some in the Group of Five that financially and programmatic-wise could hang with the Group of Five. With the Power Five. As there are some in the Power Five who probably should be in the next group. But they grandfathered in, and they're in the big boy league, and so I don't think anyone's gonna kick anybody out. So. The only thing I could say, there will be some shuffling on within the next 10 years. I don't think anything will happen. This TV contract, I think everyone's TV contract runs maybe 10 years or so. So nothing major will happen in the next 10 years. But after that, I think something will happen.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And I did want to bring in, a comment from. This is not from the audience, but I think Bill Snyder, I'm not sure if you heard about this, back in the early part of the preseason made some comments about college football selling out. And I'll post the link to this in the room, but I just wanted to read, and while not an official statement, I just wondered if you agreed with some of the things that he said. It's changed. College athletics, football in particular, has changed dramatically over the years. I think we've sold out. We're all about dollars and cents. The concept of college football no longer has any bearing on the quality of the person, the quality of the students. Universities are selling themselves out.
Well, I wouldn't say it. I wouldn't call it a sellout. But I think Coach is right in that universities and particularly their high-profile programs have given an awful lot to the television, changing of television times, changing the date of the games because of the dollars. The dollars are significant to run these programs, whether football, basketball, or whatever. So you've got a decision to make as an institution or athletics director or president. Do you accept these dollars, these precious dollars, to run your program? And with that, you have to possibly change. You could change who you're playing, change the date you're playing, change the time you're playing, in exchange for that dollar. And in some way, those kind of changes do hamper and what you do for your student athletes in terms of when they play, and do they play a Thursday night game and come back in the next week and play another Saturday game or Thursday game or whatever. So it has changed. I agree with Coach on that fact, that it has changed. But I wouldn't say it's a sellout.
That's interesting. And I do see both points that, it has changed. Even in the short time that I've been an avid football fan. When I first, my mother is a Kansas State alumni as well, so we've been, but her experience as a football fan of Kansas State was completely different.
Right.
She often tells the story about, because she was in the band, that the students used to bring their homework to the games, and they would go and do the pregame show and sit back down and do their homework and get up and do halftime and then leave.
Right.
But with the change in talent and the ascension of Kansas State athletics, the experience of football has really changed at that university, and it's happened across the country as we've seen more television dollars and money changing hands and all of that. Then we really have seen a significant change, and I hope it'll be good for us, good for college athletics across the board.
Well, it has to be, because if it's not, then I think the whole enterprise is in trouble. I think what's going to be important is that the leadership, whether it's at NCAA level, conference level, universities, and athletics directors, is to really get a handle on it. And at some point, you've got to be able to say no. The key point that is important beyond anything else is the athlete. The student athlete, and you have to put the student athlete first. And I think what's happened over the years, I think you asked a question earlier, I think the student athlete was beginning to get pushed back to a secondary or even third role compared to facilities and and coaches' salaries and taking care of everybody except the student athlete. So I think this rising of students' welfare, of unionization, and all that kind of stuff has put really the student athlete first, where it should be.
That's good. And I will say, to give the other side of it, as you have seen a rise in the money that comes from particularly college football and college sports in general, it does benefit the universities. I don't think there's any mistake that, again, to speak of Kansas State, which I'm most familiar with, when the football team started to do better, they rebuilt a library on the university campus. The football teams continued to do well, and so they have completely redone the track and field stadium, where that is. And I really don't think that any of that would have happened had the football team, had they not invested in the football program and brought it to the level that it is.
No question about that. No, I think that the athletics and the university ought to be hand in glove. They're one. And I think the statement that's often made is that athletics is the front door of the university. So very few alum get excited about going to an opening of the law building. But you're talking about opening of a football season, or opening of a brand new stadium, they all want to be there. So it can be used to the advantage of everyone, particularly the university, but it has to be used right. It has to be monitored, and you have to be smart in how you do it. But making sure that you keep the student athlete first, or in the case of the university, keep the student first.
That's great. So we're going to jump topics and get more into the bowl playoff system. But as we do that, just wanted to give a more of a fun break. Are you willing to make any kind of a prediction this year as to who you think is going to win? Who's going to win it all? We've had one real week. We've got games coming up today. Dare you make a prediction?
Well, I think that it's tough. The first week is tough because some teams aren't playing anybody. Other teams probably aren't ready to get to that level of championship. So I think that it's odds on. Florida State, as the defending champions, I think that they have a good shot to run the table, or at least be in the Final Four. I think from the SEC, I'm not sure. I thought Alabama, but it may be Alabama. I'll go with Alabama just because everybody's there. But Auburn could do well. It's going to be interesting. It's interesting. So the winner, I should pick the Florida Gators. That's what I should pick.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, I should pick the Florida Gators to be the winner. I don't know. It's too early to tell.
That's good. And Don Nix, who was our Fem Fan of the Week, was talking about LSU. And one of the neat things about her and what I liked about what she said, and I'll be posting that link to the video as well, seeing as how it doesn't want to play, is that she was really realistic about LSU. And I think, as football fans, we have to be honest about where our teams are. I mean, not every year is going to be a championship year for every team. It's just
right.
It can't happen that way. And, her comment was she thought LSU was young. They had a good recruiting class, but they're also young. And so that this year is going to be a time for them to learn from a lot of the senior members of the team. She really didn't think they were going to be national championship contenders this year, but expected them to do well regardless.
Well, anyone in the SEC has tough schedules, and LSU has a tough schedule, and it's when you're young in football, it's tough to run the table. I mean, and again, then it depends on where you're young at. I think the key to winning a championship is two things. You've got to have great defense, and you've got to have a good quarterback. Those are the two elements you have to have. Everything else you can deal with. You can not be well here, but you have to play great defense, and you have to have a good quarterback. Quarterback doesn't have to win the game for you, but the quarterback can't lose the game for you. So that, as we watch the season, let's watch for those teams that are playing good defense and those teams that have good quarterback play.
That'll be something to definitely watch for. I think you're absolutely right on that front. So now that we get into more, the bowl playoff system, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't understand it as well as as the BCS. Explain to us, how does this new system work?
Well, I'm going to give you the layman's terms
Go
because
for
I
it.
don't think anyone really knows how it's going to work because obviously we haven't gone through it. But the whole premise was trying to the public wanted a playoff, and the compromise, instead of going to a full-blown playoff similar to what we have in basketball, which would be totally unmanageable, was to come with a starting number of teams, and in this case they chose 4 teams to be in this playoff, and they utilize 6 bowls, and that's so they can have other teams that not in the bowl game be represented. I mean, excuse me, not in the playoff be represented in the other bowl games. So, but let's talk about the playoff. Similar to the NCAA, they're going to have a committee, and this committee is comprised of individuals who are, I guess, supposed to be well knowledgeable in football and things of that nature. But who knows? Some of them probably. You and I probably know more football than some of them on the committee, but that's here to be said. But they're going to select the teams that are going to play in these four playoff teams, and they're going to use a criteria that they've come up with, and it's going to come down to really, in my opinion, it will be more stress to try to get to those 4 slots than it ever was to try to get to a BCS game. Because in a BCS game, all you had to do was win your conference, and you were going to a BCS game if you're one of the power conferences. But now you can win your conference, and you're not guaranteed that you'll go to the playoff. You have to have played well enough, won games, and come up with this system that they have of choosing the 4 top teams to play. Those teams will play, and then 2 will play for the championship, which will be I guess on Monday, sometime Monday, 2nd January, Monday Night Football. So it's going to be interesting. I think will they have some hiccups in it? Probably. Probably people will not agree with the selections that they choose. Then again, it may be 4 obvious teams that are the top teams above, heads and shoulder above everyone else. I don't think that will happen. I think there'll be 2 teams that will be head and shoulders above everybody else. They're just 2 great teams, and I think they're going to have a real tough time trying to distinguish who the other 2 are going to be. So that's it in a nutshell. It's going to be interesting for everyone to follow it because it will be different than the BCS. As much as everyone cried about the BCS and disliked the BCS and whatever, it did produce the number 1 and 2 team most of the year, and that was the design of the BCS because I was a part of the structure of the BCS when it started years and years ago, and that was the only intent. So I will be joining everyone else and looking to see how this thing works.
Yeah, one of the questions that I asked Dr. White and actually Don as well was, is this system going to solve the problems that we saw in the BCS? And one of the common complaints was, and it happened more recently towards the end of the BCS, excuse me, where you had more than 2 teams that felt that they legitimately had a right to play for a national title. Either you had 2 teams that were clearly dominant, but then you had another school in a different, maybe like a Mountain West Conference or something like that was undefeated. And they were like, well, hey, we went undefeated, we beat everybody we played, how come we don't get a shot at playing? Or you had situations where you had 2 or 3 teams, 3 teams in the major conferences that that won out or did very, very well. So that was a common concern, was that that late at the end of the BCS, you had that reoccurring problem where there were multiple teams that felt that they had a right to play. So do you feel that this new playoff system solves that problem?
No, it won't solve that problem. You're still going to have that. You have that problem with in the NCAA basketball tournament. You know, who's the 65th, 66th team who should have gotten in there? They didn't get in there. They had, you know, more quality wins than someone else who got in there. So you're always going to have that. I mean, the only way you can ever have that not happen if you have all 125 teams into a tournament. So everybody gets a chance at it, but that's unrealistic. That won't happen. So I think this attempt to do 4 is the right step. If you want to make a step from the BCS to this, that's the right step. Now, I don't think it's going to end there. I think it'll eventually go to an 18-team playoff. And usually, Carmen, if you get to 8 teams, there aren't more than 8 great teams in a year. I mean, all those people who are 9, 10, 11, they can argue about, but they just have it because it's a numbers game. Somebody has to be 10, 11, 12, 13. But the top 8 teams in the country usually separate themselves. So that's why I think 8 is a better number. 16, if you go to 16, now you're putting in people who have no shot at beating the number 1 team if they even play them. They can't. You know, football is different than basketball. The 16 team in basketball can probably beat the number 1 basketball team, but in football that is very, very, very tough. So it won't solve the problems, but will it ease it a little bit? Probably not, but it'll give more conversation. We'll be talking about something else for another 6 years.
Yeah, that will be true. I mean, and I think you're right. You know, the Cinderella story of what you see in college basketball is far more unlikely to happen in college football.
Yeah, far more. You just I've never seen it happen where, you know, if you took a number 16 team or whatever, play a number 1 team. Let's say Florida State played Boise State. I just don't think Boise State would beat Florida State.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with you. That is true. That would be true. We do have a comment. You know, someone in our audience is saying Richard Clarkson that the BCS needs a playoff system instead of the current system, and that's just what Keith was explaining. You know, the BCS is actually shifted into a playoff system. I don't think it's fair to say that the BCS is no more, or is that a more correct?
Well, the BCS is no more. There's no such thing as the BCS. It's the college football playoff, and they're not in a full-fledged playoff. They're in a hybrid type playoff with 4 teams. And you know, again, I think you have to understand college athletics, and when you're in it, you know, people say, well, why can't we have this? Why can't we have that? And why can't we have this? Well, the difference between college athletics and professional athletics is that professional athletics is usually there's a team owner, and a team owner makes a decision with the league. There are 28 of them. They decide to do something, they change it. In college athletics, there are 125 or 300. Their presidents, their boards, their athletic directors. There are just so many people that it usually takes you 5 to 10 years to change a direction. So everything you're seeing now, and I was in the bowl business, you know, for 13, 18 years, a long time. Everything you're seeing now was introduced years ago at that time, but it was way ahead of its time. It's been simmering, and, you know, a little bit of change here, a little bit of change here. And I remember years ago, people said, we'll never have a playoff. We'll never have a playoff. And I came back and I said, don't say never, because you know once you say that, eventually it's going to happen. And look what we have today. We have a playoff. So those who say, well, we'll never have 8 to 16 teams playing NCAA football, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's just, it won't happen for another 10 to 15 years, but it will happen.
That would be interesting. And I think, you know, in that type of a system, would it look more like the NFL playoffs?
I think the danger that you have in having multiple teams in a playoff is that what do you do with the bowl system? And that's, you know, the bowl system is something which is very, very sacred to college universities, because it's the only opportunity that you have that everybody wins. You go to a nice location, you spend a week or so, people wine and dine you, and the kids and the fans love it. So No one wants to lose the bowl system, but if you can figure out a way to do it, as they have, to utilize the playoff within the bowl system, then I think you have a winner.
That would be interesting. One of the concerns that I know that is expressed, and it's sometimes kind of funny when and how it's expressed, but is, if we lengthen the season, then we say, well, what about their academics? We're taking student athletes even more out of the classroom, particularly, these football players, and it's not just them, but the whole support staff that the football team requires. There's trainers, there's cheerleaders, there's bands, there's all, there's a lot of not just student athletes, but student involvement in college sports. And so if we lengthen the football season into, a longer playoff style thing, then we're taking kids out of the classroom longer. What do you say to that argument?
I think that's a good argument. I think you're right. I think you don't want, football should not be, the regular season should not be a 2-semester sport. In fact, I believe basketball shouldn't be a real 2-semester sport. I mean, it's just, but football should be, the regular season should be done, and then you have the bowl games or whatever you may have, playoff, and you're done. Too many games right now. Student athletes could play upwards of, let's say, 12 games, 13, 14, 15 games maybe. And after a while, the pros play a 16-game schedule. But obviously they get paid a lot of money, and they're used to that. But the college kids, I would not be in favor of a longer season. That's why the playoff, I think you've got to really be careful about that. Maybe it's a trade-off. If you want to go to a full-fledged playoff, maybe you don't have these championship games at the end of the season. The Big 12 doesn't have a championship game. At one time, those championship games were all about money. So you did it to get extra money on TV. Right now, you don't really need that. You've got a lot. The regular season is worth a lot. Teams are now playing other teams and other conferences, and that's valuable. When you've got, I think today we have, I think Michigan State is playing Oregon. I mean, that's a good football game that fans want to see, instead of Oregon playing, Oregon
State.
Some school that doesn't make a difference. Mm-hmm. So I think you'll see a lot of changes, and things will be for the better.
Yeah, I hope so. And and in this conversation with Dawn, we were talking about the idea of a longer season, particularly with football. And and as an athletic director, you're well aware that there are sports in college that do span the entire school year. There are some athletes. Being in track and field, I remember I had good friends that ran the mile, and so for them, they ran cross country, which started right before school started. They rolled right into indoor, and then they ran again for outdoor, and that championship and all of that happens after the school year. So literally, you're in a training competition mode the entire school year. Right. So while I understand track and field and football are completely different sports, why can't football? What would it take for football? In terms of what would the universities have to do to support football if they wanted to go to a longer system?
Wow, if they wanted to go to a longer system, wow, it would be expensive. I mean, because now you're talking about either starting early in August, earlier games starting in August. Instead of the last week in August, which they start now, you can start similar to what the pros do. I mean, the pros start their preseason and everything early, and I don't know that they would be into that. I don't see that happening. I don't see the seasoning, especially on the front end, getting longer. Back end, right now they're already going into mid-December. I think there's a game now. The Army-Navy game is probably the mid-December, so it might be the latest regular season game. So they're pushing the envelope, in terms of semester break, testing, having the kids, have enough time to study. One of the things that I strongly support is really giving the kids more time off away from training, conditioning, so they can study and have a life. Because the college experience should be that. It should be the experience of college life, and not all you do is train and compete.
That's a good point. So we've got about 10 minutes left. Tell us a little bit about your company, and I want to give you an opportunity to share what you're about, and some of the projects that you're working on.
Well, my company is Tricom Management Group, and we really are involved in event planning, event management, and client representation. We've got a couple of projects which I, not at liberty to announce today because they haven't been fully developed. But we specialize in events, and we've especially football classics, and things of that nature. But I also involved in development, fundraising. As I said earlier, I also am the CEO of a fundraiser for a hospital, local foundation for a hospital here. So I try to keep my hands busy in everything I do, and then and when my good friends like Carmen call me, I try to do sports shows for her so we can talk sports and really educate the public on what's happening in college athletics.
That's great. And one of these, I may have to have you come back. I'm a huge fan of the HBO show Real Sports. And the last few episodes that they've had, they've really talked a lot about, these global sporting events and, the business and the mechanisms behind those events. And unfortunately, they're focusing kind of on the scandalous stuff. There was one episode where they were talking about the white elephants that have been created by, the Olympics, particularly Greece, and their facilities that have kind of fallen apart. They were critical. Well, the piece that they did was a bit critical of the World Cup in Brazil, and the dollars that are being spent there. And while that's not the focus of this show, but you have a brief comment about, kind of that whole issue.
Well, I think as sports is just like anything else. I mean, everyone takes advantages of opportunities, and whether it's the Olympics or whether it's Super Bowl or whatever, the cities, towns, communities, they gear up for that financial windfall. And there is a financial windfall when you're talking about major sporting events, global sporting events, and Super Bowl is right up there as a global sporting event. And I think you're right. I think when you can present global events, and the world is so small. I mean, we have a lot of the European soccer teams that are playing in the United States and drawing tremendous crowds. The NFL is going overseas in Europe to play football games. NBA. So the world is going to be closer, and we're going to be able to go across different continents and create events and stage events or what have you. And so it's a very big market because of the globalness, because of internet, because of we are just a click away from being in connection or relationships with people all over the world. So sport tends to bring people together. It tends to neutralize any kind of differences you have, and that's why I love it. That's why I'm involved in it, and that's why we with my company we are involved in creating any events anywhere, anytime, any place that it can happen. So I think that unfortunately, as you said, some of those instances, I did not see the piece on HBO, but unfortunately, if there's some criticism against the money that was spent, people think that's what they have to do. We probably have that comment with some of the money that's spent on facilities within universities. But, hey, if you have it, people think they need to spend it.
Sure. And again, that's a whole nother, we can do a whole nother separate show about global sporting events. But I'll post the link to it. I think they put some segments of it on YouTube,
Okay.
particularly about the Brazil situation. And one that they were particularly highlighting was that there was a stadium built literally in the middle of the Amazon. It was so remote that they had to float the building materials in down the Amazon River.
Wow.
And it was several $1 million facility. Gorgeous, beautiful stadium. But
Of
they
course.
literally were going to play, I think, 3 games there, and it was in the middle of the Amazon. So, and there wasn't, and then that particular region was not, there weren't enough teams to put a schedule in that stadium. So it was like, who's going to maintain the cost of this stadium?
Right. Right.
So, and so I've had some other conversations, about these facilities and whatnot, and particularly what was done in Atlanta after the Atlanta Olympics, and that a lot of those facilities were repurposed into other things. And so the idea of building these giant structures that serve one specific purpose, and then after the purpose is expired, there's nothing left.
Right. That's true.
So,
Atlanta did a good job with their facilities.
yeah, they really did, and I have to give my some family friends of ours were some of the lead architects behind the Atlanta Olympics and the structures there. So I got to high five them, but they really did do a good job with putting that together. And I heard London similarly has also repurposed a lot of their facilities as well. So you won't see what they're calling white elephants coming out of there, and so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. I love sports, so again, we'll have to have you on another time when we can talk more about the global aspects of sport. But next week we are going to be talking about the NFL, and the topic, well, excuse me, it's not next week, it's next month, the October show. And just to kind of give a teaser to people and allow you to have a quick comment on that, the question, the overriding theme that we're going to talk about there is a kinder, gentler NFL really what we want? It seems that there have been a lot, I put my marketing hat on, that the NFL has tried to reposition the brand more to being a wholesome, family-oriented type of a thing. Obviously they made some changes to reduce injuries and concussions, which I'm in favor of, but we've also seen changes, the celebrating in the end zone, they got rid of that. Some of the language on the field between the athletes has been curtailed. And there are now, significant penalties to players that use language that may at best be questionable. So just as a brief statement on that, what do you think? Is a kinder, gentler NFL really what we want?
Oh, wow. Kinder, gentler NFL. Well, I wouldn't say that's what we want. I do believe there are things that we can change. The celebration, they're in the entertainment business. I mean, they made, obviously they want to win championships, Super Bowls, and all that kind of stuff, but they're in the entertainment business. So I think the sport or any sport like that, and they need to entertain. And so I think you can go overboard. You can go too far on one side because you're trying to think you want to correct something, but I think you make changes within reason, but you be mindful of what you're trying to project in terms of the entertainment value. It should be nice entertainment. It should be, I don't know if it's the wholesome is the right word to use, but obviously it shouldn't be offensive. But it'd be interesting to see. I'll be interested to hear that show.
Me too. So we'll be joined by some NFL folks and taking a look at it, not just the athletes and the players and TV, but also on the sidelines. I've been talking with a good friend of mine who was part of the Roar for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and there have been some comments about the way that the entertainers of the sport, the cheerleaders, the dance teams, all of those are being treated, and the image that's being projected by that aspect of the game. So it should be a very interesting show. I'll make sure and include you in the invites. And any of you out there, if you want to be included in the invitation to that show, just make sure that you make a comment or like the show in the in the event room, and we'll make sure and add you to the circle to get that. So I think we're done here. I apologize for some of our other video issues, but we will post the links and we'll re-edit the show and kind of add those back in. So I would encourage you to check that out as soon as that's available. Anything else you want to say, Keith?
No, it's a pleasure to be with you today, and look forward to hearing more of your shows as you progress. And and good luck to the Kansas State. They don't play the Gators, so they'll be in good shape. And and I hope you have a great day.
All right, thank you so much, and I really do appreciate your time. It's been awesome catching up with you. I don't know if we had this long of a conversation during the time I was working with you, but it's been great, and it's I can cross this off my bucket list that I've got to have a whole hour with the Keith Tribble. So I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to sign off. We'll look forward to seeing you guys next month, the first Saturday in October. We'll look forward to seeing you then.